My name is Larry Mango, and you may notice that I am not Katie McGill. I am a member of the Comprehensive and Master Committee, which I'll refer to as the steering committee or the committee.
Pull the mic up a little higher, maybe.
Better? Yes. Fantastic. Now, my mask off just for making my presentation. Again, my name is Larry Mango, and no, I'm not Katie McGill. I am a member of the Comprehensive and Master Plan Steering Committee, which is a very long name, and which I will refer to as the Steering Committee or the committee for this presentation. I'm filling in for Katie McGill tonight. Katie is the chair of the committee, and the other members are Charlene Udarkada, Mark Robbins, and John Wolf. And Conrad is the administrator. To thank, first off, the town board members, Dan Welsh and Jane Crimmins, for their observations and active participation today, and also to planning board chair Janet Anderson. The time that I have here, I would like to update the town board on the work to date, a project outline for the work that we're doing, next steps, and finally, questions from the board. And if that is agreeable, I can get started with the update from the steering committee. So this will be the first update from the steering committee. We've been working since March 12th, which time we ran weekly work sessions in this week. And during March, we put together our work platform. We discussed the committee's role, the steering committee's role, and considered best planning practices. Those were initial work sessions, which was a relatively small group. And after that, in April, we began broadcasting our meetings on the town YouTube channel. And all of these meetings, which were weekly for the most part, have been recorded and they are still available on YouTube. And in addition, all of our minutes, the time we're talking about, the to-do list, and the assignments of the committee members are all available on the website for the committee, which is the Lewisboro Town Board Committee. Or rather, the Lewisboro government website /CMPSC, which again stands for the Comprehensive Master Plan Steering Committee. The first thing that was that we really discussed and talked about and agreed to as a committee was that the master plan needs to reflect the desires of the Lewisboro community. And with that in mind, we worked to put together our mission statement. The mission statement is also on the webpage. And the mission statement is it's two parts. The first part is to engage the Lewisboro community in order to inform the future of our town and capture this vision in an updated comprehensive plan. The second part of the mission statement is to ensure fair and equal opportunities for all members of the community to provide input throughout the multi-year process. So the steering committee recognizes that a comprehensive plan update is a significant endeavor. It will require significant resources and an extended timeline. It requires professional planners and facilitators in the process. For the most part, we believe that many parts of this master plan update are beyond the resources and capabilities of the committee. And therefore, our first recommendation is that an independent consultant should facilitate community input, help to synthesize community input, and to come up with plan recommendations. This was the early part of our initial work sessions and meetings. And as we progressed into May, June, and July, launched our initial public thought meeting, which was held on May 25th via a Zoom call. And launched our survey. It was actually launched at the same time. And the community survey represents our initial effort to get community input from residents of Lewisboro. We then began work on to planning firms, which will help the steering committee and the town board to understand the costs of engaging a consultant in this process. And we've also worked to identify potential grants, which we believe will help us to understand funding that may be available from outside sources. Generally, over the past 4 to 6 weeks, the members of the committee have been working on our individual assignments, and those generally are to update our community survey and get that out to the public, to create an RFP or a request for proposals from planning firms or consultants, and to prepare grant applications. So that is the first part of my report, which is work that has been completed to date. I'd like to just go over our project outline, or the outline, see the plan update progressing from here. And broken that down into 3 phases: an introductory phase, a community engagement phase, and a plan update phase. So the first phase, the introductory phase, is what we're in right now. And during this phase, we would like to complete our community survey to get initial input from residents, business owners, and other interested parties. We're also engaged in a search for a consultant, and eventually we'll have recommendations for the town board for a consultant. We expect this phase right now that we're in this introductory phase to last into potentially the spring of 2022. But this timeline, of course, is subject to change. And it seems so far away, it's spring of 2022, but that just underscores that this is a very labor-intensive and time-intensive plan in which a lot of community input is expected. After this introductory phase would be a community involvement phase, where there will be a lot more input, we anticipate, from the community into the comprehensive plan. And that, we believe, will be after a consultant is engaged. At that point, there will be significant community outreach and engagement to fully investigate community issues and opportunities. We expect we would have a consultant at that point to help us facilitate community involvement and keep the committee involved. And at that point, we also believe there will be much more thorough program of community events and interviews, formation of subcommittees, and community vision statement. The key point of this whole effort is to create a comprehensive plan that provides fair and equal opportunities for all community members to get involved. So in this community involvement phase, we would expect there to be sessions with the consultant and the town board, with the planning board, with the CPA, and with each of the town councils and committees. We've already been in touch as a steering committee with the chairs of each of the town committees to let them know about this process and this phase of the master plan steering committee work. I'm getting a little bit short on time, so I'll try to speed it up a little bit. Finally, the final plan update phase we would expect to take place in 2022 or even into 2023, but this timeline is all subject to change. The comp plan update will take shape through public hearings and a lot of additional input. And any updated comp plan will be a draft and will only be a recommendation to the town board. And the town board ultimately would approve any adoption of any new master plan or comprehensive plan. So with that, I'll just go over the next steps and where we're at. We did have, I mentioned a public meeting on May 25th where we kicked off the survey to get some initial input from community members. We anticipate that this survey will be used as we're interviewing consultants to give them an idea of what is important to the town and town residents and what issues there are so that they could tailor their recommendations and their proposals to the needs of the town. Currently, we have about 320 surveys that have been completed. They take about 5 to 6 minutes to complete, so I would encourage everybody to participate. We are getting that message out about the kickoff survey through all the town communications, through the website, newsletter, library newsletter, Parks and Rec, Parks and Rec Senior Program. And we've also recommended that we do a townwide postcard mailing with a goal for the town board, hopefully to vote tonight or in the near term on the approval of funds to get this information out to the public through a mailing. So the goal is to more than double the response that we have to do. We're supposed to get up to about 800 responses. And we anticipate we can keep the survey open as long as necessary so that when a consultant starts, they'll have a robust view into the town residents' priorities. The other near-term steps, there's just two more. There is applying for New York State Consolidated Funding Grant. We have an application that we're putting in for a grant application. If we were successful, we're asking for $40,000. And we are currently liaisoning with other committees within the town to finish the application. And we're also looking for additional grants. And we're also just completing our an RFP for consultants. This draft RFP has already been circulated to Jen Johansson and Jed Cedar, and they provided some feedback. And we request that the town board officially share the draft with the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, and the architectural and community review. And feedback would be due on August 26th so that we can get that grant application in that time. And our goal is to have approve the RFP for issuance in September. And then the steering committee will distribute it and post it to the appropriate forums. See what else? We've also begun discussing the format for the committee to review responses to the RFP and to make a recommendation to the town board. But for now, that is in the very early stages. And that about wraps up my update. And those questions from the board with that.
I'd like to make one comment, one request that they approve the application for the grant. I had a slightly different.
John Wolf has been working on the application, so I would say that's the
Larry, is that a matching grant?
I don't believe it's a
Okay.
Basically, to help us in these.
Which institution are we submitting this to?
To the super, smart growth for the middle. See that.
These are my,
Oh, yeah. We're submitting it to the CFO, smart growth.
And we authorize the supervisor to sign the grant application for the to the CFA Smart Growth. $30,000, $33,000 of the comprehensive plan.
Discussion, all in favor? Aye. I'd like to go one step further, thank John for an extraordinary effort in getting this done on a very short timetable. It really was good. I'd still like to thank him whether or not it's successful. Next, other questions, comments? And you're finding yourself in the real. You're about to ask a question. All right, thank you very much. I'd now like to ask City School. Specifically, to concentrate on the ones in Lewisboro, because they're the ones that affect us more than others. Susan, just one thing, I was told that if you speak with handheld mic, it will work better with Zoom listeners. We're having an issue with that particular. You can leave your mask off for a minute. Screen. After this presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
That's great. Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Susan Rayburn, City Consultants. Thank you for having me up this evening to talk about the plan. Just as a reminder, city state does not work for any tower. We don't own towers. We don't lease towers. We to have identified so that you can plan on how they might get filled to have a robust network. So the wireless master plan is a wide program that is actually being paid for by the Westchester County. I presented a number of slides previously, and I'm going to recap that presentation shortly. And we ought to have to engineer that in the process of the program. Wireless master plan is addressing the infrastructure that is used to have your wireless handsets work. And the first wireless handset was a bag phone, and we've since transitioned to the high-speed manual handsets that allow you to stream and have all features that you're probably heard of, if not new. And in order for those handsets to work, you have to have an elevated antenna. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about broadband. I'm not talking about Wi-Fi per se. I'm just talking about the wireless network for these devices to work. Some quick facts. For the next 10 years is that more and more Americans are relying more and more on wireless handsets. Just on their wireless phones. And of the next, of an estimated 240 million may have a wireless phone. And those numbers are only going to continue to go up in the next 10 years. I keep referencing the next 10 years because that's a projection. We don't want to plan just for right now, we want to look to the future so that you can be proactive on how you address the industry. So there's two types of wireless infrastructure in order for the network to be designed. You'll notice a custom, I believe, now the macro cell towers. Those antennae are rather large. They go on typically towers like on monopoles, wax towers, and they project a much greater distance. However, there's a capacity issue because of all the bandwidth that's being used by the handsets that require a lot of data. The industry is starting to supplement with small wireless facilities that are 50 feet in height less, and the antennae are much smaller. The disadvantage to that network design is that those small wireless facilities do not communicate their signal as great a distance as the macro cells. So you have to have more of them in the same geographic area of the macro cell in order to increase your capacity. So some examples of the macro cell sites from our study area in Lewisboro are the towers that you see before you. The two non-concealed facilities are in Lewisboro. The site S7 is actually in Somers, and it is concealed, but it is also providing some area coverage from that site, so we include it. Examples of base stations are antennae that do not mount on a tower. So if they mount on the building or a water tank or a utility distribution line or a rooftop, that is considered a base station. And these are examples of base stations in your study area. So small wireless facility examples can be seen on the next slide. And you don't have any small wireless facilities in Lewisboro yet, but there are two in Somers. So site S4 and S5 are examples of small wireless facilities. You can see how characteristically different they are from macro cells. And then an example of another one is actually in Florida, but we use that example because it gives you what they look like. So I'm going to move right on into mapping, and objectively, the study area that we're looking at has 95 total wireless facilities, and of those sites, 7 of them are in Lewisboro. So most of your sites, as I go through the next series of maps, I'm not going to talk a lot about this because I did that in the previous presentation, but just to refresh your memory, you have actually 6 built sites, 1 through 4, 6 and 7. Site 0 or site L5 is one that is proposed. It is not built yet, and it's considered under review. We also include the sites that are one on perimeter because those sites have an effect on the build out of the propagation pattern. And so there are 7 in that area, and then there's a couple just outside. And so the entire study area has a total of 17. Next slide, please. Of those sites, 6 of those, all 6 of the ones in Lewisboro proper, are used for personal wireless service facilities. Next slide. You do have some sites that are on public safety sites as well, specifically L3 in your community, and so that was listed a little bit differently because it has a dual purpose, public safety and wireless communications. Next slide, please. By location, the sites are predominantly on private property, although you do have 2 existing that are in Lewisboro. Site L3 and L4 are on public property. And then by design, all of your existing sites are non-concealed. The site at L5 that is proposed to be concealed. So all of your existing sites are non-concealed. So I'm going to spend more time, I know that was quick, but I'm going to spend more time talking about these sites and the simulated propagation maps. So what Cityscape does is we start with that existing inventory, and we assume that each site has all 4 wireless service providers on them. Now, we know that is not the case, but the intent of this plan is to suggest that if there's a site that's existing, then if you want to foster and promote co-location, then all of them would ultimately end on that same tower. So we assume that each provider is at each tower, and we use a generic base antenna that is characteristic among all the providers. But this is not a scientific exact propagation model because this is a simulation. We don't know the exact antenna model by each service provider. This is my disclaimer. We don't know the power outage. We don't know if there's beam tilt. There's a lot of things that we don't know because it's proprietary. And we're not focusing on the exact coverage. We're wanting to focus on the gaps. These maps are really to display to you the gaps so that you can be proactive on filling those. Next slide, please. So the map that you're about to see is a high frequency map. And again, it assumes all of the same providers. And we use the coloration of yellow to no color to demonstrate the simulated propagation pattern from each antenna. So if you see yellow on the map, those geographic areas have a in-building coverage, meaning inside of the building, you will be able to use your wireless handphone. If you see green on the map, you might have in-building coverage, but you will have it outdoors. or in vehicle, excuse me, in vehicle. If you see blue or purple, that is outdoor only. And areas that have no coloration at all represent your largest gaps, where you don't have coverage. You would not have coverage. So we're going to zoom in now to Lewisboro. And again, as you look at Lewisboro in total, you see all of the sites that are in the study area. Okay, if you'll just keep on clicking, that's great. Thank you. And there are 11 sites that we are specifically paying attention to. And I'm going to zoom in now to those sites so that you can see them a little bit better. So site L1 is in the northern part of the town. And if you look at L1 as it relates to L2, you'll see a large area. Go ahead and click again, it'll zoom in a little bit more. There we go, thank you. You'll see that there's a lot of area in there that has no coloration. That's a big gap. And so in order to have effective handoff from L1 to L2, you would need another site in that geographic area. If you could go back just a little bit more, if you go back to that slide again. And then to the east and to the south, you also see more gaps. And so wherever you see those gaps, those are areas that you can anticipate needing a site in the future. Okay, next slide. Now I want to focus a little bit more on L2. L2 is along your I-interstate corridor, and it is providing a pretty good coverage along that corridor. It is got a pretty good handoff to S11, which is in Somers, and a handoff to S8, which lights up that whole corridor. But you'll see it doesn't really connect to L1. Next slide. Now we're going to look at site L3, and the handoff to L4 has a gap right in the middle of that area. And so if you click on that one more time, Tony, you'll be able to see while you have a lot of yellow and green around L3 and L4 right in the middle, you have a gap that should have something in that area in order to have adequate handoff between those two sites. Next slide, please. Again, this is showing how the handoff between L3 and L1 is rather poor, and the handoff from L4 to proposed L5, the handoff between 4 and L6 also has a lot of coverage gaps. Next map. Now I want to focus in on L6, and I want to talk a little bit about that. If you'll click it again, L6 does not show much coverage in the immediate vicinity. It's on an elevated terrain, and it is projecting to the next elevated terrain area, which is where those green areas are to the east and to the west. I want to caution you in that I mentioned we don't show beam tilt in our maps. And so those valleys adjacent to L6 to the east and to the west may actually have some coverage if the service providers are tilting their beams downward. And so this is the only map that I wanted to point that out to because of the characteristics of the terrain. And then the next map, L7, is providing a very good coverage in the southwest corner of the township. However, it's not handing off at all to L6. Or if it is, it's very poor. And so that whole area in there that has no coloration is going to need additional infrastructure. So I want to now look at Highway 35, Route 35, also known as Cross River Road. And the focus of this map is to show how L3, L4, and L6 are working to provide coverage along that section of the corridor. But again, you have gaps and those areas need more infrastructure. So in summary, The next slide is going to identify if you just click, Tony, through that, it'll pull up some of the areas that we particularly draw your attention to in the circles. You just keep clicking, because there's 4 areas on this map that we draw your attention to that will need infrastructure. And then your summary map for the southern part of the township is on the next slide. And again, if you'll click through, it'll identify the 4 geographic areas that we identify that are in need of infrastructure as well. Now, we were asked specifically to look at what would happen, next slide please, if the site N9, which is in North Salem, where you have public safety equipment that's owned by the county, if you were to install, or not you, excuse me, if the industry was to install wireless equipment on that site, what sort of benefit would there be? And so if you look to the site, the slide on the left, you'll see that there's not much coverage. The slide on the right, or the map on the right, shows N9 turned on. And Tony, if you'll click, there should be a few circles that pop up. There is a marginal benefit if N9 had wireless equipment on that site with it, mostly because it is so far away from your town jurisdictional line. You have tiny bits of improved coverage in those 3 circles along the north, but if you look at them comparatively, there's very little yellow or green that's gained. We were also asked to evaluate what would happen if we turn on L5, and you will see in the larger circle areas the improvement with L5 that goes from the blue, purpley, green to more of the yellow in that area along Route 35. Now, this is all coverage. And network design requires a look at capacity as well. And so there's 3 variables that we look at specifically to look at capacity. The first one is how many people are in the square mile and the census blocks in the area that we're studying. Because the industry wants to first service those areas with higher population densities and along the corridors. And those are the areas that they tend to go to first. And objectively, from the whole, looking at the big picture, you'll see how you've got along the northern part of the same region, along northern part of Yorktown and Somers, and then Mount Pisco into downtown Bedford, how you've got lots of population density, and then you also see there's more sites there, and you can almost follow the corridors by looking at this map on a big scale, because you can see how the industry has plotted along them.
Is there a break-even point for the industry as to a certain population density?
I'm sure there is, but I don't know what that is because it's confidential information for each service provider. So the next series of maps, I'm going to now just focus on Lewisboro. We have 2 census blocks, one in the L1 area and one in the L6 to L7 that has the highest density per square mile. And you do have sites in those areas, but the subscriber base is intensified in those areas because you have more people per square mile, which means they're putting more stress on that infrastructure. So even if you do have coverage in the L7 area, you may still need to have more sites in that same area because of capacity. The next variable that we look at is land use, because sometimes we find that the land use may show low density, but it is an industrial or commercial area that has a lot of job bases. And so this is a map that we put together, taken from the tax assessor's office. And this is a snapshot from that day of the number of parcels that were basically used for residential, commercial, vacant, and most of the land uses in your Lewisboro area, you all know this, are mostly residential. You have a lot of open space, and your commercial nodes are small. And so the next thing that we look at is how all three of these maps come together. We look at the population density map, we look at the land use map, and we look at the coverage map to determine if we need to tweak site numbers based on capacity. And for Lewisboro, we find that we do. So these next slides use a different coloration. The area in green shows a simulated capacity that is adequate for the number of people and businesses per square mile to that facility. And so if it's orange, then the ratio is problematic, meaning that at some point in the future, you're going to need to have more infrastructure in those areas that are orange. Red is very poor capacity, and even if you have coverage in those areas, you will need more sites for capacity purposes. And if there's no coloration, it's because there's no coverage. And if there's no coverage, then there's no capacity. And so those are your most serious gaps. And so the next two slides, I'm going to talk about the capacity for L6 and 7, because that is one of your largest areas of population density. And if you'll click again, Tony, you'll get the circles that show up. So the area south of L6 has no coverage. It's an immediate need for a site. And L7 we've identified because even though you have coverage, there's just one site down there, and there's no way in L7 that you have enough capacity in the future for the number of subscribers. The next slide, L1, even though it is in an area identified as a higher number of people per square mile, based on the land use classification, you also have a lot of open space and parkland in that area. And so for right now, in the future, we identify that as a lighter green. At some point, you'll probably need a site, but not necessarily in the next 10 years. Your next slide is looking again at the distance between L1 and L2. Both of those, L1 and 2, have good coverage and capacity, but you've got that gap, and so that's a target area. And the next slide, again, is showing how you need to have handoff between L1, L3, L2, L3, and L1 and L2. So if you'll click on those. And one more click. Okay, that's fine. And the next map is identifying your gaps north of L4 and to the east of L1. And this is assuming that perhaps a site might get built in L5. And I'm not saying that it would be in a geographic area of L5, but if that site was built, you would still have a coverage and a capacity issue to the north. It's not going to satisfy that area. So if you click, Tony, it'll show those areas as well. So those are the geographic areas you're most concerned with. And just 3 more slides. The sites on this map, you go ahead and click and pull all the circles up. These are target areas that we anticipate more infrastructure needed. Again, even though L4 and L7 have coverage, the capacity is strained because of your corridor of traffic and because of your population density. L7 is examined in this next slide. And again, even though you have good coverage, you have a capacity issue given the number of people per square mile in that geographic area. So you're going to need more infrastructure. And then the last comparative map I want to bring up is a map that was in the minutes of the Antenna Advisory Board in September of 2020, when they were looking at a map that identified areas where you would need new infrastructure. I will be very honest, I did not look at this map until after we completed all of our work. And I was very pleased that we matched. And so the areas that your Antenna Advisory Board researched and show target areas where you need sites also align with the maps that we did. However, we also showed more sites are needed than what the Antenna Advisory Board presented because of a capacity concern for the next 10 years. So where do you go from here? How do you fill in those gaps? Well, that is not for me to determine. That is for you to determine. And we've developed a community poll that will help maybe guide a policy directive on how to fill in these gaps. So we're going to pull up the poll, and I'm going to take a few moments to walk you through it. And then after this meeting, and maybe probably by tomorrow, that poll will be live, and everyone can go on and start filling in the poll. We invite as many people to participate as possible. The more that participate, the better off the information is for filling in, making recommendations to fill in the gaps. So first of all, we want to look at, we'll print it out, and I'm going to move up here so I can see the screen better. Sorry. So at first, the first is to talk about, are you a resident or are you a business owner? Are you both? Do you work in Lewisboro? Do you live in Lewisboro? And you can just scroll through. And what type of infrastructure you prefer? So we also want to know, okay, thank you. We also want you to identify where you live in our street house. I mean, welcome to the street house. You can use the hamlet. You can just put the street. You can put near this intersection. If you're not comfortable using your address, that's fine. This information will be used for us to compare your response to a map, because we might be treating people based on what people say in terms of their experience in the community. We then ask who your service provider is. There's also a spot where it says, I don't have a service, so you can fill that in. And we want to know if you use a booster to enhance your service at your home or your office. And then we want you to rate your coverage. Excellent would be 5 bars, and 4 would be 1 bar. You'll see all those as you go through the survey. Keep going. And then we ask some questions, and we ask if you agree entirely, or if you agree somewhat or neutral. If you agree or not agree at all, we want you to answer these questions. And then once you get to this part of the survey, you'll click next. Then we get more specific into the types of infrastructure. And so we want to know things like what's most important to you: excellent connectivity, aesthetics, and code. And then we walk through examples. For example, so if you have a non-concealed home, which one do you like the most? One, rats, or dogs. And then as you scroll through, you have examples of concealed types of facilities, and we want your input on which types of concealed facilities you prefer. And then which types of base stations. That's why it's important to understand the technology. And it keeps scrolling down.
Just one thing, I just got a message, they're not being picked up on Zoom because you walked away from, there's another mic in there, so
Okay.
sorry about that.
Okay.
Is that it, right, Joel? That's where she, okay.
All right, so you get to the second part of the survey, and you can start discussing the types of infrastructure you like or you don't like. And if it's a base station, if you want it concealed, or you don't care if it's concealed, and you would have it, you want it non-concealed. And then with your small wireless facilities, even though you don't have them in your community now, you can expect at some point in the next 10 years, you'll start seeing them, especially that they're already in sonars. And again, concealed versus non-concealed. And keep going. And then a few more questions relative to appearance and aesthetics, and then you're done with the survey. Once we have this information, we'll collect that information, we'll tally and put the findings together. We'll compare that information to the gap analysis maps that we've done and to your existing public policy. And if there are areas that we think that you can consider revisions to your public policy that would address the concerns of the community more, then we will point that out. But we're not here to tell you how to build. I just want to make sure that you know we're going to bring all this information to you, and then it'll be presented to the community, and then you can decide how you want to use it. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Susan. Questions?
One thing I'm not clear about is how to accepting the G5, was it?
We're not 5G.
5G.
The industry right now is ready to decommission their infrastructure software for first, second, and third generation. Some of you may have seen, if you're subscribers, if you pay attention, that they mentioned to you that your handsets, that between the end of the year and into the next year, will stop working if you are operating on the first, second, or third generation platforms. And that's because they're transitioning completely to fourth and fifth generation technology. And over the next 10 years, we'll see sixth generation and seventh generation. And so the infrastructure will still look the same, but they'll make changes to their software and to their hardware to advance everyone up to the higher speeds of downloading and uploading. That meaning you'll have to have more facilities because the bandwidth even here is going to be is not going to be strong enough to meet the needs of that future infrastructure. We're going to see more and more devices relying on the infrastructure as well. That the connectivity of the machine-to-machine learning, Internet of Machines, and Internet of Things that create more of a wireless bubble for automated vehicles to connecting more wireless devices is going to grow. It would be like saying just because you're a low population, rural characteristic community than say the northern part of your town, that no one here is going to have a wireless device that has all the apps and bells and whistles that the new phones have. I'd say that's probably not the case. I'd say probably a lot of people have the wireless devices that have built-in GPS and streaming of video and access to news and media and watching movies. And that's just gonna be part and parcel with 5G in the future.
We can post this report on the website.
Yeah, I'll make sure this gets posted on our website. So I have a question about with some articles about within some communities to roll out 5G. Concerns about can you talk to that specifically 5G, not so much the.
With 5G comes cells and a lot of small wireless facilities to accommodate the amount of data and bandwidth that's needed. And there is concern across the nation that the smaller antenna have, because they're low to the ground, might have a health effect on humans and animal life. But with the Telecommunications Act of 1996, you are not allowed to regulate the radio frequency emissions from these sites. If the FCC has deemed them to be safe, then you can only require the industry to provide proof that and certification that they are meeting the criteria that's set forth for them. And you cannot deny a request, you can't hold back a request, and you cannot regulate the RF perspective. I know there's a lot of communities that have joined together to take up a lawsuit against the FCC, but no determinations are being made at this point that I'm aware of. And until the FCC makes a determination, then you have to continue to follow the rules in place. Keep in mind, and I'm not saying, I'm partial except to say that I have to follow the rules, and that's the rule. But I will point out that those small wireless facilities are much smaller than the macro cells. And they don't transmit nearly as far, and they're not as powerful. They're not nearly as powerful as the macro cells. But that's all I can speak to in terms of, because the propagation pattern is so much smaller. But I'm not denying that or I'm not saying it should or shouldn't be one way or the other. I'm just giving you the information I have.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience here? Yeah. Actually, probably want you to use the mic so folks on Zoom can, if you don't mind. Yeah. Joe, this mic's okay?
And I can restate the question for the people on Zoom.
So, the community plan, one, is there any mechanism to make sure no one goes up the pool multiple times? And two, if the poll's going to be available on the website, could the great presentation that we just saw, in that day, I couldn't see a lot of the maps especially, and not knowing much about this, I personally would say the mapping stuff, because I'm not about it, I don't know about it. But I think it's important for a like that, if you just because I don't know that would be more.
This would be available on the website. Yes.
The presentation.
The presentation will be on, so the presentation will be available and the poll will be announced. Yes. Yeah, you Thank you, Billy.
Okay, to restate the question, first of all, is there a mechanism in place to keep one person from filling out the poll 20 times or 100 times? Yes. So you will have to enter either your name or an email address. It is not going to be used to start sending you spam, or it's just to prevent someone from filling it out a bunch of times. Now, is it possible that one person might have more than one email address? Yes. Can we regulate that? That's going to be a real tough one. So ask everyone to be on your honor, fill it out one time. But in terms of being able to fill out 100 times, you have to have 100 email addresses. And the second question that was asked to restate was regarding the presentation would be available online. So you look at it while you fill out the poll, and the answer is yes. And the slides will be available as well. Yes.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to, instead of the question, just about the potential health effects of 5G, and I was
you maybe a little bit more specific on that, because from what I understand, the idea that there is any health effects of widespread 5G and I'm worried that maybe there are some people less familiar with technology in the community that hearing a non-specific answer on their health effects would maybe so just my question is there any evidence of there being a health related to widespread 5G better wireless stations which you've just been talking about?
So the question to restate the Zoom listeners is to speak more about the effects of 5G and whether or not the people who are saying that there is a health concern, is there any validity to that? Did I restate the question correctly? Okay, thank you. And I understand that there are reports on the internet that show that there are concerns that people should be aware of. But I cannot speak to those exact studies because the FCC says that there's no harm to humans or animals from the emissions from these antennae. And I have to support that because that is the law that I have to support. And so I don't have a personal opinion to share, but just that I can, and I will speak more to that when we come into the regulatory side of it. But I want you to think of these sites that are built have sort of a mushroom look to them with the RF. And that you have the pole or the base station that the antenna attaches to, and then you have the antenna at the top or near the top. And the emissions come out like a bubble over the top and make it sort of look like a mushroom. And the emissions are strongest right in front of the antenna. And the farther you go out and down, the farther you get away from the RF emissions coming from that antenna, to the point that your rise and run get to a point where there is no interaction with that emission. So, but I know that there are concerns, and I don't want to belittle anyone who does have a concern. I understand and I hear what people are saying, but I have to go back to what the SEC has in place, and they say that there is none provided they follow the requirements that are in place. Yeah, if they're negligent in following those, then you could have a health concern. But if they follow the parameters that the FCC has in place, then the FCC is saying that there are no harmful emissions.
In that case, thank you very much, Susan.
With that, I'm going to go.
That on the first one we could, and on the second we could. But,
Because I was told that.
so we're not.
Strictly still. Okay.
Anybody on Zoom?
No.
Nobody on Zoom? Okay.
All right.
Second.
Discussion. I'd like to move on to the presentation. I know what you know, but could you introduce?
The Lewisboro Library Fair coordinator for this year. So on behalf of the Lewisboro Library, thank you for having us tonight. We are very excited to share that the Lewisboro Library Fair is back this year. This will be our 60th year of holding the Lewisboro Library Fair. It will take place back at Onatru, as it always has, on Saturday, September 18th. So contrary to a really widely held belief, our specific libraries' extensive programming and services are really only partially funded by your tax dollars. We have to make up that deficit every year through generous private donations and a lot of the special events that you hear about. Our largest and most important community event, where we raise a lot of this money to keep our operating budget going throughout the year, is through the Lewisboro Library Fair. So many of your favorites are going to be back. So we will have the car show, we will have the sale of books, of children's books, of our attic treasures. There'll be lots of great food, including new options from some new food trucks that will be there. Our beer tent featuring Captain Lawrence, a silent auction, our children's zone, which have some expanded new fun things, and a very expanded vendor market. New this year, in kind of conjunction with our car show, will be a farm equipment show. We're also going to have a fruit and veggie, as well as sunflower pumpkin competition. So all you urban farmers that have been honing your skills for the last 18 months through all of this, you can bring your largest pumpkin, your most beautiful tomato, your really proud flower arrangement, and we'll have a competition. Fairgoers will be able to view them and vote on some of them. And we're also going to have a dunk tank with local celebrities. Maybe someone up here might volunteer to take an hour in the dunk tank. So those things that will be new this year. Among other things. We're going to have our donation days, and this part will be slightly different than maybe some things that you've experienced in the past. So this year we're only having 3 donation days, and just for everyone's knowledge, the donation days are the days that we ask the community to bring your in good and working condition items to us to donate, for us to sell in the children's book sales, the book sales, and our attic treasures. We really want your treasures to sell. So those 3 Saturdays that will take place are August 14th, August 21st, and August 28th, only at Onatru from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We ask, and it's really important to our Parks and Rec department and our staff, our daily staff at the library, that no one bring items outside of those donation days. We don't have to volunteer manpower to put those items away and save them to be sold. So those 3 donation days during those times are really important to bring all your great treasures. Because we're trying to be really cognizant of the space that we have and the number of people that come and restrictions that we're trying to put in place with COVID, we have one category that we're not accepting this year that if you've saved up for, I apologize, but we would not be accepting or selling children's toys this year to make more space for the other items. So the Lewisboro Library Fair takes a small army of volunteers, to be really honest, to put on. This year we do have an online sign up, which you can find on the Lewisboro Library site. If volunteering doesn't sound like it's something you want to do, but you have a high schooler or a middle schooler, it's a really great opportunity for them to get community service hours, and we're really happy to have them. All of the info that I just shared with you and more is on the library site at lewisborolibrary.org, which includes applications for the vendor market. So if you have a small business, an artist, if your neighbor makes something really great, you can share with them. Any community groups that want to have a table and share about their community group, as well as corporate sponsor forms, are all available on the Lewisboro Library website. Thank you.
can have it.
I would like to something is correct and considerable. Some treasures.
Maybe the other one, right? That's the Zoom mic.
It's too much technology. You want to take the next one?
Yeah, Rich. So that's the mic.
Try this now. Try this.
And then this is.
It's a resolution to rescind.
It's not working. Yeah, it's tough. This is the one that's on Zoom. Right, Joe, this goes to Zoom?
Is that one working out there? We'll go over there. That's easier.
Swap mic is the camera mic. It's sync up with the camera. It's good. You don't have to. Yeah.
Some reason. Sorry? Yeah, okay. I'm making a motion to rescind the June 28, 2021 resolutions authorizing the sale of 2 vacant town parcels on Main Street in South Salem. Tax map 108 lot 25-32B and tax map 10819 lot 26-32B. Why? I initially cast my vote to authorize the sale of these 2 long vacant town parcels because I trusted the information provided by our dedicated town employees and long-term residents. I still do. The June 28 resolutions were in conformance with longstanding town practices as well as applicable law. But I learned after the vote and doing some research and speaking at length with the tax assessor and others that many town-owned vacant parcels never had their decades-long out-of-date assessments brought current so that they would accurately reflect the current value in light of 2 events which transpired decades ago. One, enactment of DEC wetlands provisions, and 2, the subsequent enactment of a 150-foot wetlands buffer here in town. So, what did that mean? The 2 lots in question were never given an updated assessment, and every parcel in town has to be given one under applicable law. And as a result, the 8,000 or 8,200 assessment for these parcels was never brought down and reduced as it was supposed to have been done decades ago, which would have equated to approximately $250, or 1/32 approximately of what it was carried for decades. So when you calculating the equalization rate, it resulted on the tax assessment of being a value of approximately $80,000 or so, instead of the approximately $2,500 or so that the tax assessor would have valued these parcels if the tax assessor had gotten to it. And based upon we're a small town, small amount of employees, there's only so many hours in a day, so that's something that the tax assessor had never gotten to bring up to speed. Now, there's also proof of this in my research. I found a year 2000 memo talking about a couple of parcels which were comparable and assessed at about $2,500 in value, and also a 2021 memo from the tax assessor indicating that 3 comparable parcels from 2018 through this year were valued in the $2,500 to $7,500 or $8,000 range. So the numbers on the June 28 resolution were right, but what should we do now? I believe the best course of action would be, with the support of Mary Hafter actually, that we simply have a reset of the process and rescind the June 28 resolution so that 3 things could happen as I see it. 1, the tax assessor can go through the current inventory of vacant town properties, carving out those which cannot be sold at all because of conservation easements, for example, and ensuring that you have an updated current assessment of those town properties which need one, so the town inventory properly reflects the current fair market value as determined by the tax assessor, who under applicable law is supposed to do that, under applicable provisions of the New York State real property tax law. And that amount was initially thought to be 40 some odd tax parcels in our town. And in speaking with the tax assessor today, that may be more, somewhere in the 15 to 20 range, but she's taken a preliminary look at that. 2, the updated inventory of town properties with the updated and current assessments can then be placed in a central location on the town website for all to view and ensure that the public has the most updated information on a going forward basis. And 3, during this time frame, while the town assessor goes through her process, which will be a lengthy process, the town board has the opportunity to review its practices in selling long vacant town properties and see if any adjustments are warranted on a going forward basis or not. So with that said, I'm making a motion to rescind the resolutions for the sale of those 2 vacant parcels as indicated.
I'll second that. Discussion? All in favor?
Can we roll call it, please?
Roll call.
Jay?
Dan? Tony? Aye. Rich? Aye. Myself? Aye. Dan?
Yeah, speak it to the, use this mic here.
Chairman of our Sustainability Advisory Commission, Bob Fishman, is going to talk about this NYSERDA grant and the proposal for that. Yeah.
This one was accepted.
This is for, yes, in here. I think that's, so this is our best, Mike. So say. So which? Okay. Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Hold on a second to share it.
Make sure it comes to the mic.
What's that? Okay. Thank you, Tony. Thank you to the board and Dan for the opportunity to present here on behalf of the Town of Lewisboro Sustainability Advisory Committee. Town of Lewisboro has been named a clean energy community. Next slide. So the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or NYSERDA, has a grant opportunity that has been running since January of this year under Program Opportunity Notice 3298. It's called the Clean Energy Communities Leadership Round. They had run a Clean Energy Community Grant Program a few years ago, and this is, and in that grant opportunity, all the funds were taken up all across the state. So this new round, the leadership round, has some excellent opportunities. The goal of this grant is for local government officials and staff who want their communities to benefit from the new clean energy economy, but struggle with tight budgets and limited staff, to receive grants and coordinator support and clear guidance for implementing a range of high-impact clean energy actions. And NYSERDA is helping these local governments save money, grow the local economy, and improve the environment. In order to qualify, NYSERDA has identified 13 high-impact actions, and they are scored. We'll move on, Tony. Those high-impact actions include some things that the town has already adopted, and some things that the town certainly could easily adopt, and some things that would take a little extra effort. So just quickly read through what these are. The Unified Solar Permit, which is a standard permit for solar projects all across the state. Energy code enforcement training for our building department officials. PACE financing, which the town of Lewisboro has already adopted. Clean energy upgrades on existing facilities. Clean heating and cooling demolition projects, demonstration projects, excuse me. The adoption of 100% renewable energy on municipal properties. And on the next slide, a climate smart community certification, the change out of street lights to LEDs, which we have already done, benchmarking of municipal buildings so that the energy use in those buildings is recorded, and you have a starting point for comparing any future energy upgrades. Clean fleets. The town has already started on that, as I understand, by recently acquiring a police vehicle that meet that criteria. And the community choice aggregation, which is a means of purchasing clean electricity for all members of the community, and we have done several actions on that already. In addition, there are some additional opportunities which afford us the opportunity for even greater grant funds, and they include the adoption of what's called the New York Stretch Energy Code. And the Stretch Energy Code basically looks forward to what the next energy code will be and asks the town to adopt that in years in advance of that. And that happens on a 3-year cycle anyway. So this is a sort of an easy lift for the town if they wanted to do that. And then there are the opportunity to run certain community campaigns that will also save residents energy dollars. And we've done some of those in the past, like the Solarize campaigns and the clean heating and cooling campaigns. Moving on, the next slide is the Clean Energy Community Scorecard for the town of Lewisboro. And we have achieved 4 high-impact actions already. They include 2 amongst the community choice aggregation,
the LED streetlights upgrades, and the PACE financing. And with that, if we go on to the next slide, the town of Lewisboro has been awarded a $5,000 designation grant for completing 4 high-impact actions. So then the question became, well, how are we going to use this $5,000? So NYSERDA asked that we identify some sustainable initiative, and the Sustainability Advisory Committee to this board has reviewed various different options in front of us, and our recommendation is to create a program that will reduce the environmental impacts from fossil fuel powered lawn care equipment. Those environmental impacts would include the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, improved health benefits, and a reduction in noise pollution. Those grant funds could be made available to discount electric lawn care equipment such as leaf blowers, lawn mowers, edgers, things like that. On the next slide, I'll show you here a survey, which this is one question from a survey that was asked about a year ago, on the town residents' use of leaf blowers. There were 550 respondents, and approximately half of those respondents indicated that they own and use their own gas-powered leaf blowers, and a fairly similar number engaged landscapers to do the same. In other words, the landscapers are using gas-powered leaf blowers. The next slide is from an organization called the American Green Zone Alliance, or AGZA, and this represents the cost savings that one might expect to receive from converting from a gas-powered leaf blower to an electric leaf blower. And I will tell you that, in our opinion, these figures are slightly exaggerated for our community. It represents 850 operating hours a year, so that's a little bit overstated, I think. Having said that, the savings side from going to electric is also at 20 cents per kilowatt hour. And in fact, we are actually about 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So that equates still to a 10-to-1 savings at whatever hours you're using leaf blowers. So that's just a baseline number for comparison. Next slide, however, does reflect something that is just simple health benefits on noise pollution. Most electric equipment is within the EPA thresholds for noise as it affects our hearing, whereas most gas-powered equipment is well beyond EPA, NIOSH, and OSHA thresholds for that type of equipment. On our next slide, we propose some model of how these funds would be used. We are suggesting that with this $5,000, we would provide coupons to purchase zero-emission electric battery-powered equipment that residents and landscapers could take advantage of. So we are proposing a model that would allow for both residents and landscapers servicing our residents to be able to get coupons that would go towards the purchase of electric-powered or battery-powered equipment. And that might be, say, for residents, a coupon of anywhere from $25, say, to $100, and that would be at the higher end if they trade in their old polluting gas-powered equipment. Landscapers could similarly go to their customers here in Lewisboro and get an attestation from the homeowners or tenants, as the case may be, to say that they want and will only allow them to use the electric equipment on their properties. And they would get a coupon level of, say, $25 per customer up to, say, $200. So if they got 8 residents to sign up, then the landscaper would get a $200 coupon, which could be applied to the purchase of battery-powered electric equipment. So the program administration of this would be done, we are proposing actually with separate funds which have been allocated from a separate award that we've received from the Community Solar Program. And that would be administered by an organization that does this nationwide called the American Green Zone Alliance, or AGZA. Those of you who want to look it up, agza.net. They have some fabulous information up on their website. And they would help us engage with local vendors so that local vendors would be able to make that equipment available. So this is another way of engaging in the community, finding local landscape equipment providers to stock up on or make available to their customers electric battery-powered lawn care equipment. So that might include leaf blowers, might include lawn mowers, might include edgers, and that sort of thing. So last slide here is the ask. The grant for this, the application for this grant has to be completed by August 26th, and I understand that some work is already underway at the administration level. So we ask that the town board approve a resolution to use the NYSERDA Clean Energy Communities Designation Grant to operate an electric battery-powered lawn care equipment campaign to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Lewisboro. And with that, I close on behalf of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, and I'm willing to take questions as and when appropriate.
Could I add, just to get more specific on the exit piece and the, sorry. Yeah, just to get more specific about the assistance from AXA, we're proposing to pull $750 out of the $7,500 we got for perform the AXA consultancy. AXA is going to help us to put together an report. We'll go through in detail all the recovered machinery that's turned in and assess the greenhouse gas impact, et cetera, and also liaise with the manufacturers for us to set up these discount. So the ask would be the $5,000 grant for the discount program as described here, and additional $750 with solar earnings that we had. Questions first before?
That all sounds good. I don't know if there's anybody in town that we could put a pitch in for that's selling this equipment.
So we've had some preliminary discussions with Harvest, and the manager of the Harvest is interested in this. The issue might be for him that he has to align with particular manufacturers, and his operation is not so much retail, but he does help customers out from time to time finding electric lawn care equipment, and he's more than happy to do a lot more of that. In addition, Ace Hardware, which has facilities, Chubby's down in Pound Ridge, and Richfield Hardware nearby, could also participate, and they're local vendors too.
If there's any business we could help in town to do this, that would be great.
Yeah, and that's why we approached Harvest. To my knowledge, they seem to be the only game in town who are in the lawn care equipment, but we certainly welcome input from others because we would like to find more vendors and be able to engage local vendors to do more of this.
It's definitely the priority, and if they can meet the manufacturer's criteria, because sometimes they need a certain amount of space or whatever to, inventory, whatever it might be. So we're working on that.
So, motion to approve the resolution?
Question. I think looking at this, and it is a grant that really works, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And when the grant runs out, what happens then?
Well, so there are several things. One, this is a fixed grant, so we would use these funds specifically. We propose to use these funds specifically to help homeowners and landscapers servicing Lewisboro homeowners and residents, meaning tenants, to use this. So it will be on a first come, first served basis. That said, we would want to do a little bit more research in formulating exactly how much. So, for example, if you took the $5,000 and put $50 per piece of equipment, you get 100, people participating. Maybe that's not the right number, but we've got to figure that out in a little bit of detail. But the idea is, yes, it is a fixed amount. Having said that, there are other opportunities for us to do more things, more of these high impact action items, which would enable the town to get additional funding. And if you do look around at some of the other communities around the state, and specifically here in Westchester County, you'll see that other communities are getting some pretty sizable grants from NYSERDA to do more and more sustainability initiatives.
My only concern is this.
Yeah, and then it runs out of time. Then the issues on Zoom can hear.
And then the cost of the money or what you implement usually gets passed on to the consumer or the citizen. I'm not saying I'm against it, I'm saying I don't know too much about it. It's just not on because I did. I pulled something up today and I was going to address this, and it was just funny because we're talking about clean energy. And I'm for clean energy. I really truly am. And actually, the noise that gas blowers and even electric blowers make, mine makes a hell of a lot of noise. And it's horrible on a Saturday morning or even a Sunday morning because we're supposed to have a town ordinance that nobody uses their blowers or lawnmowers, but people do. And it was quite annoying. But I did look into using battery operated blowers and lead blowers, and I found out that they have a life expectancy. And that the batteries are very expensive. So I looked into it a little bit more, and it's ironic. I pulled this up today, and this is from the Center for Research of Energy and Clean Air, and they talk about China dominating the 2020 coal plant development. And they're talking about, just summary-wise, showing throughout the world, it's on the rise in China. In 2020, China built over 3 times as much new coal power capacity as other countries in the combined world. The equivalent of more than one large plant. So China has 5 times as much as in other countries where construction permits for new coal projects. So, and I'm reading this. Yeah, I mean, it's not applicable. Okay, I do my question is, which is 90% raw material made in China, they own 90% of that. Are we supporting with this? Are we supporting China? Are we supporting solar panels, wind turbines, batteries? This is just a campaign. So I appreciate it. I just had a couple of questions. What I wanted to do if I had to grant one out, who ends up being or fine. That's it. Thank you.
Word added. And you know.
Nothing to celebrate. Shall we, any other questions from the board or anything on this, or should we just move that resolution?
Move to approve the resolution as proposed.
We'll do that, yes. Presentation.
Second, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Website.
Good.
Thank you, everybody.
So the next item on the agenda was the discussion around the renewal of the Westchester Power Program. The goal originally was to keep us moving along on the renewal process, which means signing, which requires a series of actions, and the one that would have been taken tonight is to discuss and hopefully move on the MOU, which commits us to the participation for the next bidding process. I did have some discussions. With Rich today on it, and he does feel like he'd like to, learn more and get more up to speed on it before we do take that action. And I'm happy to give you the time to do that. We do have a schedule to hold to, so we definitely have to take action by the next meeting, which is August 9th, I believe.
Understood.
And so before that time, any questions you have, I'm happy to answer. Again, just process-wise, this MOU is a joint agreement between us and 4 other towns in the NYSEG territory: Pound Ridge, Bedford, North Salem, and Somers, to participate in the bidding process, which then culminates in an auction where we bring the possible suppliers for the town's power program to come and bid on the next round, the contract for which starts December 1st. So there's a whole series of actions that happen before then, but this first step is that the towns come together and sign this agreement, the bidding process. So we'll leave that one where it is for tonight and expect it on the agenda for the August 9th session. So, sure.
So this is a problem that's based on what I.
Yes, correct. It's been a participant in it since that time.
Right.
It started out with 20 municipalities in Westchester, and it's up to 28 now. And actually, Yonkers is just under. And many other communities also around the state have started following the lead. So it's improvement from them.
Biggest moves that has been made so it's not splitting out.
Say also that there's an important development that will be layered on top of this also, that we're working on towards the end of the year, which is the incorporation of the community solar program, which has already been deployed in town on an opt-in basis. We have to actually sign up and register for it, and you get these credits on the bill, and actually save a little money on the bill, put more renewable energy on the grid. It'll then be channeled through the participation in the Westchester Power Program and some other new innovations so that everybody will get these credits as supported participation. So continued innovation and new programs to drive more green energy through the town's participation.
So Dan, this is just to approve the memorandum of understanding?
It's to authorize the supervisor to sign the memorandum of understanding, which is, as I said to you this morning, is essentially an agreement to participate in the bid, and if bids come in compliant under the target level, then we're agreeing to sign the contract.
Okay, based upon our conversation and reviewing of the materials, I'm ready to proceed forward.
So you are, okay, that's great then. So
That would ask a motion, Rich, or what?
You can make it.
I move that we authorize the supervisor to sign the memorandum of understanding with respect to participation in the next round.
Second. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Next. All right. The state of the terraces around our baseball field is not good. And that's been
The microphone.
Jason Elliott. I visited the town park at the request of Councilman Tony Gonsalves to inspect the condition of the existing in the vicinity of the baseball field backstop concession stand, just into a pedestrian access walkway. Much of the retaining wall system was in poor condition. Failed and is portions of the wall and protective railing along the walkway recently collapsed, and several of the stair treads are rotted, presenting a trip hazard. The area has since been temporarily barricaded. However, given the intenseness of the problem of the public and the condition of the areas described above, the potential for an accident or other unforeseen occurrence or condition which could affect public property and safety is a concern. We will recommend that the town board consider immediate action to resolve the current issue correct as soon as possible. Based on that, I decided that this is we suspend procedures and to spend $26,000 on this, or not exceed
Second.
discussion.
Yeah, let me just, can I just add just a few words?
The letter was addressed, it was addressed to me.
Yeah, so this, the retaining wall has been, it's got. This came up in 2015. I did some research. We are funding that we had approved back in February, parks improvements. we were able to optimize how things are spent, and that's where the money is coming from for this repair, which is much needed. And not going to replace it with just railroad ties type of retaining wall. It's going to be concrete. So it'll last for a very long time and be very durable. And so, so we're going to do that. Combination of in-house crew and materials, and an outside contractor. But it's a very good price that we're getting this done for. So,
And it's a long-term fix of the problem.
it's a long term, yeah. And it'll be much better looking when it's done. Guarantee that.
I got about it, we have to redo that vote. For the rest of the power. I forgot I was gonna, abstain.
Abstain, you have to abstain.
Yeah, abstain from it, so. All right, let's do that again.
Let's do that again.
Let's go back.
Let's vote on, I'd like to propose,
Somebody else.
somebody else has to propose.
I propose to supervise the signing the Westchester Power, standing. Do I have a second?
Yes. Oh, can I? Yes, I can second it.
Okay. Discussion?
Rich. Tony. Me, aye.
Aye.
Ben abstains.
Dan,
Dan abstain.
thank you.
Yeah. Does that work? Am I legit? All right, I'd like to move on to the next item.
So we should vote. Do we vote on the retaining wall? Oh, yeah, I think we were up to the power, we're going to say all in favor, I think.
Okay. But it's an expenditure of money, so it needs to be a roll call vote, right?
On the, just one, the town attorney wanted to just clarify something as far as the motion on the,
I'll say it to you, so you can say it in the mic. We're not waiving any bidding requirements because it doesn't, it's only wrong procurement policy, the money rate that you're actually entitled to do. Okay, there's a reference to bidding and it's not a threshold bid.
Yeah, let's let him,
That's exactly what it is.
why don't you come up here, Greg? Well, yeah.
and this is for, oh, you have one there, yeah. This, let me do this one.
We didn't know how much it was gonna cost.
Now you do, that's right. There are a couple of hands up, do we want to entertain them now, or? Wait till public comments?
I'd like to.
Yeah.
Wait for public comment. And I'd like to go on.
Sitting public hearing now? The gas station law that's.
Yes. I'd like to set a public hearing for the gas station law, which would be on August 9th. Next meeting?
The next meeting is August 9th.
Yes.
Correct.
I'd like to set a public gas station law.
Just set a public hearing for August 9th on the proposed gas station law.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Can you just summarize what that, okay.
Basically says that there will be no more gas stations. Partially summarizing, it's as simple as that.
Okay.
Is that better?
That's all right, just want to make sure. What is that?
Have we voted on that?
All in favor?
All in favor? Kevin, why don't we go in with a wheelchair because it's going to get better than us.
These are just some administrative steps for, PFAS treatment project, part of requirement for when we apply for a WIA grant, which is a Water Infrastructure Improvement Act grant. We need to go through these steps, so we have to accept the map and plan to be report, which was the plan and engineering report that Delaware provided to the New York State Department of Health, which is created. Second part is determining the project to be a type 2 action under SECR, which means that because of the size of the expansion, to go through the actual state environmental quality review.
Negative declaration.
Negative declaration, correct. Third item is the article for public hearing, so I think we have to set the map to be report.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
The report is part of the agenda packet, and again, it's for this, forwarded to the Department of Health. They needed to get a copy of it before end of May, so they submitted it, and it's currently on their review.
And everything, the entire Oak Ridge update that you gave recently is on the website for people to review as well?
I'm sorry, say it again.
The Oak Ridge update that you gave recently is on.
Yeah, so we had a meeting on Wednesday night. So the YouTube video was up. The sound quality was good for the Zoom people that came in. Sound quality in here projecting out was not that great, but it's which I will, on the presentation that I presented that night, I will put on the website as well. Basically, it's a history of Oak Ridge, the water district, the wastewater, the improvements that have been done since the town to local, and what's currently being done today, and including this new project, which hopefully will be approved by the health department. Process and setting a schedule, putting a schedule in place, and getting the financing that we're applied for.
Where we were, where we are, where we're going.
Right, exactly.
This, on the agenda is a resolution for August 9th. Is that the hearing we just approved, or?
No, we approved, we accepted the map to be report, which again is part of this agenda. And the second item is a resolution determining the project to be a type 2 action under SECR. Motion. So motion to.
I think we already had a vote on that, right?
Yeah. Now you do the secret and then you do the public hearing. Did you have a motion?
Motion to declare the speaker project to be a type 2 action under SECR.
Second. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye. And then the third item is the order for public hearing on August 9th, 2021.
Second.
Discussion.
Aye. Aye.
The next item is a resolution approving installation of an Altice Cablevision fiber optic cabinet on Mead Street. This is not as terrible as I first thought it was.
Yeah, so maybe I can talk to that also. So this is part of Optimum's rollout of fiber to the home. So they're putting in these cabinets. This is the first. They showed me last year, expecting the rollout. Cabinets in place to support that infrastructure. So this would be the equivalent of so when you power goes out, you're not going to lose your table set.
A single cabinet.
Yes, it is a single cabinet. Yes, I think it's a small tower.
There's a picture in the packet there.
Yes, it's in the, yeah.
On page 117.
Page 117, I can put it up on the.
Yeah. basically looks like some of these little, in the developments, they have the power.
Yeah, use your,
It basically looks like you have a little power substation box in some of our developments rather than the pole wire coming in. It looks like it's one of those boxes.
That's why I was describing it, I didn't have any show and tell.
so yeah, this is what it'll look like.
Does this need to go through, it's just us, doesn't need to go through ACARC or planning or?
No, because I don't think anything in this area needs to go through. Reach out to the building.
On me too.
So the building inspector, shouldn't he have referred that to you?
Because he referred it to us.
Okay, well, yeah,
All right, so we will need to check that.
Okay. So at least we can give whatever approval that is, wanted out of us, and then make it contingent on.
All right, let's,
Okay, motion to approve the resolution. Motion to approve the resolution, subject to ACARC approval if necessary.
do we have to let the neighbors know, any kind of notification to the neighborhood? Nothing, just,
Maybe that's part of the ACARC process.
I have no idea, I just, this, I know it's seemingly simple, but I haven't, I don't know, do we just do it, we want to get some true math
yeah,
now.
use the mic. If it's turn down. Which is atrocious. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have used the word atrocious. They desperately need to turn down the company's efforts to improve it. See, that's down on
Thinking about the process and letting neighbors know, don't confuse that with my saying we should turn this down.
The motion was subject to ACARC if necessary, so that'll include whatever process needs to be done.
And yes, and I don't think ACARC has anything to do with neighbor notification, so I would say that's something that we have to discuss as a board or think about. This is not precedented on my tenure on the board. We've never installed something, and when we have, and I didn't know about it, such as the guardrails in Lake Truesdale, people were quite upset. I think that, you make a decision and you do something, and that's okay, but there's a way, I think, to communicate to neighbors that is easier to hear than it just appearing one.
All right, I would just note that at the moment, Verizon is replacing every pole on Elmwood Road. And they've not done, and as far as I know, they have permission from nobody.
It's within your right of way.
Yes,
And this is coming to us because it's not right away, in other words. This is town property.
It's the town right of way. I believe that's why it's coming to us. It's a town road.
yes.
So it's not, but it's not, so they're not stringing it, it's not wire strings on utility poles or equipment on utility poles.
Okay.
So it's it's on the ground within our right of way. I believe that's why, but
All right. So anyway, Jane's making the point that maybe we need to think about processes when stuff comes up in the right of way. I mean, we haven't had this exact thing, but we get culverts and we get whatever else, but let's.
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, is this the golf course? Or is that near the country club or Walkabout, 100 Mead Street?
Yeah, I mean, it could be anywhere.
Yeah.
The point is just that,
Is it outside your?
It looks like it's the preserve.
Yes, that's what it says on it.
That's it?
Basically,
Yeah.
section of.
Pinecrest Meadow Preserve, it says on it.
Yeah, it looks like it's thematic, right, like the intersection of need.
well, let's consider this, generically, obviously, it doesn't matter where it is, if there's a need for us to think about processes when something's going into a right of way, so visibility, effort, then let's talk about that.
Okay.
We do the final vote on it?
Why don't you make the motion as you would like?
Use your mic,
We already have
Jim, would you like to make a motion that you would like to?
That town board approves the installation of LT's Cablevision fiber optic cabinet on Mead Street subsequent to further discussion on how to notify the neighborhood and to review whether it needs to go through ACARC approval being in a special character district.
The neighborhood is the landowners association.
The mask on, like, that's hard, so I quickly need to take it off. So I move to pass a resolution approving installation of Altice Cablevision fiber optic cabinet on Mead Street, subsequent to further discussion on how to, like, subsequent to, communicating with the Walkabout Landowners Association. And seeing if it needs to go through the ACARC review process being in a special character district.
But that's kind of contradictory. We're approving the resolution, and so, I mean, if it's subject to ACARC, which is a set procedure, so otherwise we should just table it if you want to have further. There's no commitment to what the discussion is going to be. If we're approving it.
So I made a couple of points and the supervisor asked me to go ahead and make a motion. So maybe Rich makes the motion because he seems to feel strongly about it just going through ACARC.
What I'm trying to do is to expedite this thing.
I understand.
Screaming about bad.
I understand, Jane's point is a valid one, I'm just trying, with the resolution being adopted, this should be whatever process that she wants to incorporate in, so we can get it done at a time certain, whatever she wants to do, it's fine.
Okay, and what is
Here, there's talk about me in that way, using a she, like just to the left of me here, right?
Okay,
We're in a public meeting and we're all talking, so it's really rude to say she. And to start talking about me, that's a weird.
what Jane has said is subject to it being sent to the Westchester Landowners Association and
What are looking for their?
the Walkabout Landowners Association. They think they're with it. All right?
You have a second?
Second. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. One, I'll do that.
I still don't know what's being done on it, so I'll just, you can carry it, I'll just abstain on it, it's okay.
Okay.
I can clarify, what do you not understand about talking to the homeowners association?
I understand what you said, Jane. My point is, you're making a motion to approve something being done, but the second part of it is indicating that you can speak to somebody, so if something comes in, then you're undermining the first part of the resolution, namely to approve it. It's not subject to anything happening. Subject to ACARC, meaning if ACARC has a procedure, it triggers ACARC, there's a procedure that's set to go forward, and that'll be triggered on it.
Okay, Rich, what is your way of moving this forward?
I'm fine approving it. I was fine just approving it, subject to ACARC if it's triggered. I was fine with that. And James input is absolutely fine too. I just want to get it, like you said, to get it forward. In other words, talking to Walkabout Landowners Council or whoever else, that there's no closing on that as it's stated. That's all. I'm happy with the intention that's expressed by Jane. That's fine.
Okay, we can clarify, are we just informing them or are we seeking their? Informing them or are we?
Turn it on.
Right. Seeking feedback to consider, it's got those three levels, like we're just gonna tell you. Or sometimes we do it like, we want your feedback, but we're not guaranteed that we'll do all of that. Lastly, we want your non-objection to. I think we can which one that is, then that would be helpful. Preference?
not have a preference, no. I was just thinking, I was just thinking, we've had situations where we've put something, we've had situations before where we've done something and it was totally legit and we weren't looking for feedback because we couldn't really get feedback. We had to do something, but the neighborhood wasn't notified. And they come to us upset about whatever has happened, and then we say, you're right, we should have notified you. So what I'm saying is maybe we want to notify the neighbors. Now, the mechanism to do that or how that goes within this resolution, those kinds of details are discussed.
So let me suggest that we use the second option, which is we do notify the landowners council and so their feedback, but reserve the right, to go ahead.
What you can do, you can move to approve the resolution, subject to ACARC approval, and if there's no objection by when Rockerbuck Landowners Council in 10 days, then it goes forward. So you have a time frame and a process, and if there's no objection to it, it just goes forward.
Fantastic.
Okay. John, so moved. Let's have a vote on that one.
I second.
Seconded.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye. Nicely done.
All right, public period number 2.
President of the Truesdale Estates Association, which is the lake, one of the lake homeowners association.
The mic is closer to you.
All right. Specifically, rights to Truesdale Lake.
Rob, that was really a warning to anybody who buys these properties, right? Okay.
Hi, my name is Matthew Billy. I live in South Salem. This is my friend Angela Guapolo. She lives in Katona. Lewisboro town board members, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. We'd like to make you aware of an issue that has been in the local news recently regarding special education at the Katona Lewisboro School District. While we understand that the board does not have jurisdiction over KISD, this is an issue that impacts many of the citizens of Lewisboro. A couple of months ago, we learned of a nonverbal autistic boy who was physically restrained more than 30 times over a period of 2 months before his parents were even notified. Some of these restraints lasted up to 20 minutes and had up to 9 adults present. He was restrained twice on his first day in our district. This child was 12 years old. We then learned of a KRSD special education teacher who retired abruptly in early 2020 as a result of abusing her or minimally verbal autistic and disabled students. This abuse includes choking a child, pushing a child into a wall, and locking children into bathrooms as punishment. All children in question were aged 5 to 7 years old. As a result of these events, we have formed a group called KRSD Special Education Advocacy. We are a group of over 100 concerned parents and friends of children receiving special education services in the district. We are united in our goal of making the district a better place for our kids, and this group has decided to advocate for our children by appealing to the BOE, Board of Education, supporting awareness and positive change, lobbying local politicians, and allying with similar advocacy groups. We have 5 main goals. 1, an end to restraints and seclusion in our schools until a major overhaul is conducted at KRSD. 2, cameras in self-contained classrooms where all the students are or limited. Number 3, autism-specific training for staff. 4, accountability and transparency, including an immediate self-review by the Board of Education of these 2 recent events. And finally, 5, disability representation at the Office of Special Services level. I'm almost done. To date, we have not received a response to these specific goals from either the superintendent or the KRSD Board of Education. This issue is especially important to me because I'm the father of a minimally verbal, autistic, and beautiful 6-year-old boy. I want to protect him. I'm here tonight to request that the Lewisboro Town Board write to the Board of Education demanding a formal response to the goals of our group. All right.
Email me at least, or the entire board a copy. I think you were reading, right?
So try using this. I think I'm getting that we're having a problem. So why don't you use the mic and just speak in that way? Yeah, just so yeah. So we want to make sure.
It's picked up by these as well. So
This is for Zoom.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Fairfather. I'm very proud to be here I believe in myself, it's the bridge. And for kids like my son, is very autistic, and was actually in advanced communication besides his behavior. He really takes a lot of us to do the best we possibly can. And part of my village, part of our village that we're talking about the school district that we're working with, it also includes a wonderful police department that has been incredibly responsive to my calls and a lot to my needs. But it takes all of us. It really, really does. I'm very proud to be part of the group. I have 2 children. One is in 5th grade, completely works the call, and then I have my little cousin who's going over to 3rd grade, who I would just describe. I know the guy who's in the 7th to the classroom here in the district and is diagnosed with autism. He's completely nonverbal and non-biased. He really is the most precious little and sweet little baby ever. He asks that Matthew just shared very closely come from memories and happy. As one who stated, staff member of the 17th classroom, who is no longer in the district. was removed from families and children. Then I was called into office on late November 9th in 2019. A role change forever.
Then could you try to wind it up, because that bell, I think, is a warning bell.
Absolutely. To hear that your child was choked from behind, whether really just aren't any words. Out of all of our asks, the two most important to me are the kindly self-contained classrooms, as well as training for staff to develop a firm understanding on how to work with my son. This individual has never allowed to step foot on ground during an investigation and obviously never again. This has become part of the working with the district and with our local politicians to make the changes we need for all of our children. All of our children deserve to feel safe. For kids like my son, they are the most vulnerable, and we appreciate your support in our asks. And if you would like to learn more, please feel free to reach out to ways you can help our most very vulnerable population. Thank you.
I'd like to make two comments. Sorry. I know that the town boards Anyone else wish to speak?
This, third.
Oh, sorry. Snuck up on me.
My name is you mentioned the district priority policy. Seem like a lot of money. A lot of things that need to be fixed in terms of stairs, but you only mentioned like. And, you know, what is the total cost to actually make it? Yeah, the way it should be.
So my stance is also going to keep that as well. And some of the railing up above.
So it's all being fixed at those
Yes,
sites?
right.
Yeah. And why no more gas stations? Why are you trying to?
Did you read the law or not?
No, I don't. No, it's the first time I'm hearing of you're trying to.
Okay. Because there are a couple of things. We could phrase this in the statement, if we do position, and then this would be public comments and other the process. It's not a
Okay.
we're trying to keep it orderly.
So,
Good.
Okay, we,
I'll say something.
simply go to the website of the agenda.
Okay.
And read the paragraph which says legislative purpose and intent.
Great, thank you.
Which I think is. All right.
Yes? Anybody else? Motion to have anybody, no, let anybody.
I'd like to make a motion to approve claims. Do I have a second? Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
I just wanted to recap, we had a lot on the agenda tonight. I feel like we got a lot of good stuff done. But I wanted to recap for the comprehensive plan. I wanted to thank Larry Mango for coming in absence of Katie McGinn. And I want to remind everybody to go ahead and take that survey. And that committee in the last 4 months has developed the survey and is taking in all the information. They've written an RFP for a consultant. They've launched and done several presentations. They finished a grant application, and so they've gotten a whole lot done in a short amount of time. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the process. Oh, and then I just wanted to, there's a lot of information given about the library fair tonight, and you can go to the Lewisboro Library website, but I want to plug the date of Saturday, September 18th, for the Lewisboro Library Fair. I look forward to having you on there.
Yeah.
Not much else. I just note that in Bob's presentation about the Clean Energy Communities Program, he listed the different action items, and one of which was the energy code training and there's actually a session coming up on federal organizing for building inspectors. Trying to get this in front of Joe, but I think he needs a resolution from the board or something to ask him to do. I'd like to see him go. It's in October, and we'll get credit for that. It's something we should be doing anyway. So I'll send around a.
Why did you need a resolution from the board?
No, he doesn't. He needs to know that it's a. That's all. So I'll just send around the information about this, and maybe in the next session. Sense of the board. That's it.
Copy me.
Good.
Yeah.
It's right on the website in the, so thanks everyone for.
Rich.
6-year Lewisboro Library Trustees. Amazing event. Maybe concerned that lots of help just on that day, so please reach out. So I'm hopeful.
Got into trouble with the Fed. Let's put it that way. I with a federal order. Administration of the highway department into 79.
Today is the 31st anniversary of the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I just thought that maybe since we're talking about it, it might be worth sharing that.
Okay.
In honor of the 31st anniversary.
I was.
That it is.
That the feds are going to be impressed. All right. It's an opportunity. Thanks. I'd like to announce that our next board meeting will be on 2021 at 7:30. I'm in some doubt about where it will be. I would like to return it to the light. Discuss that with my board members.
I need to know by tomorrow.
Right. Are you a little impatient on my left?
Let's make an executive decision. Now.
All right, it will be at, the next board meeting of August 9th, 2021 at 7:30 at the library. I'd now like to make a motion to go into executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
To discuss.
Oh, to discuss appointments.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor? Aye.